The all-new Yamaha V6 Offshore F350. It's a featherweight knockout, the lightest 350 horsepower outboard on the water, exhilarating boating and incredible control in a powerfully light design. The Yamaha V6 Offshore F350.
The Fishing News is sponsored by these fine partners.
It's Thursday, June 20th. I'm Jim Hutchinson with the New Jersey, Delaware Bay edition of the Fisherman magazine. Yes, there's a heat advisory this week. It is summer. First day of summer. So, yeah, it's going to be hot. That's what happens during the summer. But I decided to cool it down a little bit by taking this show on the road to talk a little bit about fluke. It seems appropriate given the reports that we got this weekend for thefisherman.com, and especially through the first part of this week. A couple of impressive dreamboat weigh-ins coming in to talk about. One in particular is going to be hard to beat this season. Tuesday afternoon, I got a message from Captain Akira at True World Tackle in Bayonne, a monster from New York Harbor for Aldo Payanessa of Clark, New Jersey, a 32-inch doormat fluke that weighed in at a whopping 15.2 pounds. That fish, of course, was caught on gulp. Now, does this mean that the Raritan Bay doormat season is officially underway? Well, I'd say yes, because another potential dreamboat entry fluke from the North Country I heard of this week came by way of Phil at the tackle box this week, who had a 9.8 pounder hit the scales. I have not seen the official weigh-in on that fish, so I'm not sure who caught it, but we're waiting with bated breath. I do know that Aldo's fish has come through, but as far as any other weigh-ins, I'm not exactly sure where we stand on the Dreamboat Fishing Challenge just yet. So like the wise old owl said in the Tootsie Pop commercial, let's find out.
And now the Dreamboat Fishing Challenge entries for the week. First, we have Robert DiPiero, Long Island subscriber, weighing in his sea robin of 2.2 pounds, placing him in 9th place in the sea robin category. Then in the weak fish category, we have Christopher Jones weighing in a 5.75 pounder. Kyle Kraus hit the scale with a 6.5 pound tide runner. And in the fluke category, we had New Jersey subscriber Aldo Payanessa with his 15.2 pound fluke. Wow, way to go, Aldo. And that has earned him first place in the fluke category. So the leaderboard for the week of June 19th looks like this. Anthony Sabino is still at 19 points. Christopher Jones is coming in second now with 12 points with that weak fish entry. And Joseph Yam is tied with Christopher Jones at 12. Just a reminder, for your chance to win the grand prize Steigercraft powered by Yamaha and other great prizes, you need to be a Fisherman subscriber and use a 2024 entry form filled out completely, available at thefisherman.com/contests.
So it would seem that the deep water doormat options are there. The open ocean fluke fishery is certainly underway. Hearing that from some of the head boats that are working outside. Of course, black sea bass is officially closed until July 1st. Then we get the one fish bycatch allowance. But if you're not fishing for black sea bass on that structure, folks are going to be looking for some of those bigger fluke. And it's certainly out front, along the beaches, along the inlet rocks, the surf line, especially near the inlets. They're productive right now for folks wanting to get out and about, looking for some fluke from shore. By boat, the bays and salty rivers are yielding some good catches about this time, so long as you can get away from the wind against tide conditions. I was out on the boat with my buddy Marty on Saturday morning, where the outgoing tide, where we are in the upper stretches of Barnegat Bay, outgoing pretty much runs due north. And of course, then we had on Saturday morning the winds that were coming out of the north blowing south. So that was pretty much a brutal effort, unless of course you had the Minn Kota, which is what I had deployed the entire time Saturday morning. I would refer you back to the June edition of the Fisherman magazine, New Jersey, Delaware Bay. It's out in newsstands right now. Maybe as a subscriber, you have it laying around someplace, and if you're going to get it at the newsstand or tackle shop, do it in the next couple of days, because we're going to print with the July edition this Sunday. But there's a good story on page 28, New Jersey, Delaware Bay edition, from Bob Stavola at B-Stav Fishing, about using this Minn Kota to break wind against tide. Break wind. That's usually what people say about this. Breaking the wind against tide situation. I know Saturday I was zigging and zagging through boats who were drifting north to south in the heavy winds while Marty and I were powering through it, going with the tide. We didn't exactly light it on fire, but it was in what would ordinarily be unfishable conditions for the most part, unless you were bump trolling in and out of gear with your engine. It costs a little bit of cash, an installation project for sure, but it's well worth it. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the Minn Kota in just a couple of minutes, some more advice. But I have been playing around with a couple of new fluke rods this season as well from Ocean Tackle International. They're Fluke Master rods, OTI. You can find them at Tackle Direct down in Egg Harbor Township. You can also find them online at tackledirect.com. These are great flounder rods, fluke rods, if you will, for small presentations. Light jigs, light bucktails. It's 5 feet 8 inches. It's available in spin, conventional, and also with the acid wrap as well. Also great snap jigging outfits as well. Now, a lot of the outback fluke that we have been catching in the upper stretches of Barnegat Bay along the flats, they're spitting up a lot of grass shrimp at the boat. So it's definitely key to lighten up your presentations, going with some of those light bucktails. I actually matched this conventional outfit with a small Maxell hybrid reel, and it also with a spinning outfit. You can go with any 2000 series spinning reel to match with that OTI fluke rod. It's great for that, and again, light braid. If you're working these back bays and rivers, light braid, 15 pound, 10 pound to 15 pound braid at the most. Now, all the fish that we caught, Marty and I, on Saturday, hit the Fish Bites 5-inch dirty boxer curly tails on the bucktail. But the bait du jour, of course, could change with any new tide. Incoming versus outgoing. It could be on the bucktail, could be on the teaser. We do have a full moon on Friday, the strawberry moon, so keep that in mind because that could adjust your drift conditions as well. One more quick fluke tip. I change out my teaser quite a bit during the day to see what's working. Recently, a 26-incher that I caught last 4th of July weekend on one of these Tin Man floating jig heads started making the social media rounds this year. But I'll tell you what, they're fantastic lures. You'll see them in the Fisherman magazine. It is a floating jig head. The one fish that I caught, a nice fish by myself last year that everybody's raging, social media comments, the keyboard warriors. Yeah, it was on that Tin Man floating jig head with a little firetail gulp, yellow and white gulp. And I will be using this again Saturday morning, Lord willing. Hope to see you out there. Let's get back to the trolling motor for a second, because the other great use for this Minn Kota trolling motor on your bow is the spot lock feature. It syncs by way of GPS. So when I press the button on the control setting, it'll stop me right there using GPS to stop me right there on the structure. Put me right on the spot. And then I could just kind of navigate around 5 feet at a time by just clicking a one-button feature, north, south, east, or west. So for getting yourself tight into the structure, spot locking outside of a creek, it's the way I like to fish in the fall when you're working those creek mounts for stripers that are just feeding on the outside. And of course, it's great for working on the bridge stanchions, some of those stand-up markers, the markers in the back bay, because the sheep's head are now officially on the table, especially in the southern half of the Garden State. The reports are starting to come through, both hot and heavy, especially in Cape May County backwaters. I've heard from several anglers this week who've been tangling with these convict fish in the back bays. Brad Weil was out with his son Brandon on Father's Day, used the Minn Kota to get a keeper-sized hog that had to be thrown back, a 30-inch striper that did not have to be thrown back, and also this 23-inch sheep's head all along the same piece of bridge structure. The following day, Jeff Simpson let me know. Jeff is from Springfield, PA. He caught 6 total sheep's head on Monday morning, 4 between 17 and 19 inches, 2 over 20 inches, all on live fiddler crabs that he caught the night before, and all in the middle of a South Jersey bridge on the outgoing tide. Looks like he was on his kayak, perhaps pedaling into perfect position. You know, I love alliteration. Fiddler crabs work for these sheep's heads, so do shedder crabs, green crabs if you can get them. Of course, we're still a few weeks out, almost a month, I guess, not until August 1st on the tog, the one fish bycatch allowance, or the one fish jetty tog, if you will. So that's pretty much when you'll get those green crabs. Of course, the mole crabs or the sand fleas, which are plentiful out along the front beaches in New Jersey and Delaware. Many of the local tackle shops carry sand flea rakes I know Tsunami makes a sand flea rake, for example, makes it easier on the back when you're trying to rake up a few tasty morsels for herding sheep in the back. Those mole crabs or sand fleas, what I used to call sand crabs growing up as a kid at the Jersey Shore, also make a great bait for summer striped bass. As many of these large and in charge jumbo stripers post-spawn continue to slide to the east, what we're left with during the summer months at the Jersey Shore, a lot of the smaller, undersized residents, also a few slot fish as well along the prowl along those front beaches. Now, in this week's Open Boat, Jenny Ackerman talks about this popular summer bait, mole crab, sand fleas, whatever you want to call them, for surf stripers at the Jersey Shore. It's practically striper candy during the summer months. And as Jenny says, quote, this bait is key to targeting stripers on your next trip to the shore.
Summertime secrets, the secret bait. I know what you did last summer. You caught stripers in the surf using a secret bait, the sand flea. This is a tiny little booger version of the ones that you want to be using, but if you put a little circle hook on this with an egg sinker and throw it out there in the trough, you can get yourself some summertime stripers. Now, you can walk the beaches and find these little guys just digging in the sand in the wash, and you can get yourself a bounty of sand fleas to fish for stripers. And if you're near jetty, blackfish, when they're in season, love sand fleas. So you can get yourself a sand flea rake or just use your hands like I've been doing for the past 24 years. I used to collect them in a bucket when I was little. I should have sold them on the beach. I would have made bank. But get yourself some sand fleas if you want to target some stripers on your next beach day down the shore, and you'll get some. Good luck.
Bluefish are around, of course. They're blitzing here and there, as we've reported in the last couple of weeks, especially last week. You saw those blitzing fish just off the beach, but we're also starting to see a few more of our summer visitors at this point in the season. Again, it is the first day of summer, so the exotic species are here. It is officially the first day of summer, as you might have seen in this week's digital edition of the Fisherman magazine, that digital cover, that red alert cover. Earlier this week, that's the redfish that I spoke about several weeks back. Matthew Tomshaw caught and released that jumbo red drum in the Monmouth County surf, plugged that one up. Now, we could see more of these channel bass come through at some point, and it could be rather extraordinary if it does. I say that because Captain Kwa Win texted me this photo this week of his buddy Devin ran into a giant school of bruiser reds 30 miles out front of South Jersey. They were blitzing on bait underneath birds. He tossed a soft plastic and lo and behold, pulled this monster red out of the school. So just imagine what would happen if those schools of redfish off the beach decided to head west and also enjoy the beaches of the Jersey Shore. Now, the late John Geiser, longtime fishing writer for the Asbury Park Press, he wrote a book 20 plus years ago. It's called Geiser's Guide to Saltwater Fishing. It's one of the books in my personal library that I refer back to from time to time. This is one of those times. If you can find a copy, I highly recommend it. Now, on page 67, John dedicates several pages to the channel bass, aka red drum or redfish. Specifically, he mentions how frequently these fish were caught by surfcasters up and down the Jersey coast at the start of the 20th century. The Asbury Park Fishing Club in particular, their members scoring some jumbo reds in the early 1900s on a more regular basis than they were catching jumbo stripers. And as Kwa said, hoping this is a good sign of bruiser reds making a comeback in our area. From your lips to God's ears. A fishery that I'd like to see make a comeback full force at the Jersey Shore is weakfish, particularly those tide runners that folks in Cape May and Fortescue used to see so plentifully back in the 1980s. Now, according to the fisheries management folks, natural mortality is the culprit for the lack of young weakfish. And with a one fish bag limit for us recreational anglers, you can't say the recreational fishermen are the ones taking a bite out of the stock recovery at this point. But those jumbos are around. This is the time of year where you're apt to tie into one of these jumbo tide runner weakfish. An old high school buddy of mine, Jerry Lewandowski, was out with his son Eric on the Indian River Inlet Rocks on Father's Day, hit this 28-inch tide runner on a swim shad. Now, Jerry said he wanted to let this fish go, but the weakfish gets its name from its weak mouth. He said during the fight, the jaw looked like it was in pretty worn out condition, so he decided to keep it. He didn't think he would keep it, but he did. What did he say? Quote, "It was delicious." It must be summertime. I see a lot of southerlies coming out of the NOAA marine forecast right now. And let me tell you something. That prevailing summer south wind that we see will push warmer surface water onto the beaches of Long Island, because that's the south shore of Long Island. The water's going to get warmer. The sharks are going to be in tight. It's going to bring a variety of baits in there. So the sharks are going to love it. And the mainstream media is going to be all over it. The New York City media is going to be talking about sharks all summer long. Mark my words. Sandbars and sand tigers, of course, may not be in the cards for targeting, but threshers are around along the inshore and mid-range grounds, and right on cue. We've had our first reports of yellowfin tuna here at the Jersey Shore. We'll look at the early reports on tuna action that came through this past weekend and into this week. Take a little Canyon Runner forecast, a sneak peek at what you could be in for if you get into the Canyon Runner coaching. And we'll also take a look at a couple of fluke tournaments coming up this weekend. But first, let's head west to the Poconos. Check in with George Schauer, our Pocono outdoors guy.
Well, hey, Jim, you know, the heat is on, and when the heat is on, what do a lot of guys do? They hit for that bass bite, and it's certainly a good bite this time of year. Early morning, later in the afternoons, really turns them on. We had a couple guys check in with some great bass. We had my friend Nick Canestra. Well, he was down at the Conowingo pool getting some bass on the glide bait. Yeah, guys, it's not quite a topwater bait, but it certainly, you know, swims up towards the surface and can be a real productive bait for getting into them bass. Also, we had Chris Matchison showing off a catch, nice 5-pounder that his son Christian caught out there on Father's Day. So that's a really good event there for Father's Day, a good present. Also, father and son were out slaying those crappies out on a little 2-inch grub, curltail grub as well. So lots of good action there in South Jersey. Good work there, Chris. Also, we had Will Schultz. He was out here in the Poconos, and he managed to get himself into some really nice smallmouth, a good local bite as well. Just because it gets warm, don't count those smallmouth out. Just move out a little bit deeper, maybe in some cooler water, and get on that bite. Don't forget the stripers, guys. They're not, you know, the water's warm, but you can still get in that striper bite. Work on that thermocline. I don't think it's quite developed yet, but they'll certainly be looking for that cooler water. If you get back in those feeder creeks or something where there's cooler water and bait coming in, you might get really lucky on some striper. And we certainly had Isabella Grouper. She was outfished her dad up there on Wallenpaupack, but he said that's just a typical day on the water with his daughter. Also, one more congratulations to Tom Gilmore. He was out and got himself an 18.5-inch largemouth, and that was big enough to get him first place in the tournament, the kayak tournament out there on Marsh Creek. So congratulations there, Tom. Lots of good fishing, guys. I think we might have a little bit of rain this weekend to work through, but I think we're still in for some great fishing. Get out and get on them. From Pennsylvania, I'm George, your Pocono Outdoors guy.
So let's go back to that weekly cover this week one more time. Every week, subscribers get a digital weekly. It's got a feature stories in there. It's got news. It's got my editorial. And yeah, it's always got another cover shot. But look at that cover. That call out comes from our fishing reports that I compiled with all of our field editors on Sunday night. The whole state, north, central, south. We've got a surf report, freshwater, Delaware, and Maryland. It's all there. But take a look at that. Specifically, the cover tease says what? Inshore bonita and offshore yellowfin. The bonito with an O, I know everybody says bonita, but the guys in the South Atlantic, they call a tunny, false albacore, they call them bonita, and they say they're terrible to eat. So that's why people up in the Northeast, they look at bonito And they think, oh, that's bonita, that's terrible to eat. No, bonitos are very good, tasty little surprise. So it may be time to break out the Clark spoons if you're looking for a little slow trolling on some of those lumps. Yeah, I said tasty. Bleed them quickly, put them on ice right away. I flash freeze them once I get home, at least a half an hour, maybe a little bit more. Firms them up, and then you pull them out, slices up really nice and thin. Great sashimi, in my opinion. That's an option. But so too is the real sashimi. Sushi grade yellowfin and bluefin. What the heck does sushi grade actually mean? I've got friends from the city who come down and will have sashimi on a Saturday from tuna that we just caught on Friday, and they'll ask me, is this sushi grade? I was like, what's sushi grade mean? I caught this yesterday. Who's this guy handing out grades for sushi? Anyway, last week's prediction was that this past week, that we would specifically see a yellowfin bite begin to commence. Spot on, my friends, it was spot on. Several reports from the Canyon grounds came through Tom P's offshore report this week at thefisherman.com, and it continued through into the start of this work week. Joe Bazzelli let me know, he sent me an update, said they were tile fishing in the Wilmington, 500 feet of water. They were fishing with Captain Bob Roman aboard his 32-foot CV, win the day. The gaff man wins the day in this video. You see that? What a nice job sticking that yellowfin. An 85-pounder comes nicely into the boat, comes home even sweeter, I'm sure. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, looking good from the Hudson to the Baltimore, according to the NOAA folks, the NOAA weather forecast. The offshore weather forecast has 3 to 4s through Saturday, with winds and wave heights appearing to intensify Saturday night into Sunday. So there's that. There's also this, reporting services. Offshore fishermen love the reporting services, right? You've got the offshore temperature charts, you've got ROFs, you've got offshore satellite surface, fish mapping from SiriusXM. There are a lot of dedicated services available to the dedicated offshore fishermen so that they can plan their outings, because you're talking about a 4-hour trip out, spending all day at the canyon, 4 hours back. You want to maximize your time there. You may have seen the Canyon Runner blurb on page 17 of the glossy edition of the Fisherman magazine, June edition. Coaching and Intel membership with live Zoom seminars and strategy calls. I mentioned that yellowfin bite at the Wilmington before that Joe Bazzelli had talked about, that was in the Wilmington the other day. Well, here's the latest strategy session from the Canyon Runner folks, if you missed it. It's a sneak peek at a membership exclusive.
This is the week of June 9th through the 16th, and we're going to start from the south. What you're looking at right now is our virtual captain system. For the entire week, every dot here represents basically 10, 15-minute interval from all our members and all our pro set that we're fishing. Zooming in down south, we had a body of water, kind of like a finger that pushed in from the Gulf Stream, that pushed in up until the Wilmington Canyon. This is the Wilmington right here. You can see the outline a little bit better here. It kind of pushed in from offshore. It was well offshore here. There wasn't much going on, but as soon as it came up into like 100, 200 fathoms, our boat started fishing it.
To learn more about that unique service, offshore service from Canyon Runner, you can visit them at canyonrunner.com, look for coaching services, or call Adam, 732-272-4445.
Big changes taking place in the Coastal Kayak Clash this week. We had 4 nice fish hit the board. Coastal Kayak Clash regular Justin Oser upgraded his category-leading porgy with a 17.5 incher. Todd Trianzi also logged in a nice porgy at 14.5 inches, landing him in 3rd place for the category. Mike Radozowinski put up a solid 20-inch sea bass, landing him in the 3rd place for the category. And the big kahuna this week was a 27-inch fluke for Bob Wagner, which shook things up at the top of the leaderboard. Now, Bob Wagner and Justin Oser are stuck in a virtual tie at the top with 9 points apiece. But because Bob Wagner has the bigger fish on the board with a 48.5-inch striper, he holds the top position. Mike Radozowinski is in 3rd place, sitting well within striking distance with 6 points. For all the details on how to enter, visit thefisherman.com/contests.
Now, This Saturday, Grassy Sound Marina in North Wildwood will host their 18th annual Grassy Sound Flounder Tournament. There's a boat division and there's also a kayak division. There's a lot of folks have been fishing this tournament for a long time. Friendly folks who typically tell me all the latest detail and intel about the Back Bay fishing. They won't talk to me at all this week. Obviously, it's competition time. Stop by and see the folks, Debbie and Jim, Grassy Sound Marina, get in on that tournament, kayak or boat. A tad north, you also have the Jane Shetler and Deb Starr Women's Fishing Tournament presented by the folks at the Strathmere Fishing and Environmental Club. You can register over there at Whale Creek Marina this week. Pick up the registration. That's for the ladies come this Saturday. Wherever you are, just keep an eye out on your rod, be it in the sand spike, resting up against the gunnel, or even in the rod holder itself. The Rays are back in town, along with those sandbars and sand tigers. Chris and Karen Arico shot this video from Hoffman's Marina on the Manasquan just the other day. The cow-nose rays were schooled up and on the feed. Yes, they are indeed beautiful. They're graceful. If you're on the offshore grounds, you want to drop your jigs below those rays because typically the tuna are swimming up underneath them. And as beautiful as they are, they're also fun the first time you catch them. But the 6th, 7th, or 10th time you have to unhook one of these cow-nose rays off your favorite bucktail while you're fluking, it kind of takes the shine off that apple. Another video that came my way via Stockton University professor Dr. Cool, Dr. Adam Aguiar, around the same stretch. Tons of baby Atlantic herring and bay anchovies, some peanuts, even tinker mackerel in the mix, Adam told me. He's a scientist. I trust him. Basically, I do think it's taken a little bit longer for some of the bait to move into these creeks, these back estuaries, the salty rivers, but they're there now. And it's getting thick, and that's a good sign for a lot of different inshore species. Now, weather-wise, it looks good here in the Brick area where I keep my boat. A little bit cloudy on Saturday with showers developing late in the day, but morning does look good. And it does look like the Minn Kota is going to get a workout again on Saturday morning because I'm fishing the incoming tide Saturday morning when the tide is running from north to south, and I've got south winds in the forecast, so that's going to keep me at odds. Again, wind against tide. I'm going to rely on that Minn Kota to get me through. Adapt, improvise, and overcome. I will tell you that fluking in the surf, I told you before, I'll say it again. I've got several buddies who are out there early in the morning, late in the afternoons with the jig heads and the gulps or the fish bites in their backpack. Bring a soft cooler because they're doing very well, especially around the inlet mouths. Any place you've got inlet rocks where you can get access to right around the base. I know we're missing all those groin rocks that we used to have 25 years ago, but if you can find any of those groin rocks closer to the inlet, it's a good sign of a good place for the fluke to be hanging out. Also, don't forget to take those thin metals, the slim waves, the deadly dicks, swap out the hooks, look for those wheeling and diving turns. If you're out along the surf and you see a turn that's just kind of hovering on the water, typically he's on bait or he's on a game fish. And I mentioned the bonito. I'm looking forward to seeing some Spanish mackerel and also some bonita in the mix as well along the beaches. Catch them up. I'll see you again next week right here at thefisherman.com.